My name is Landon Bryce. I'm from thautcast.com, and I'd like to talk to you about wandering. There's a proposal by the United States Centers for Disease Control to add wandering as a diagnostic classification for people who have autism and other developmental disabilities. What this means is that people who have a tendency to wander, basically to move away from where other people think they're supposed to be, that would be added to their diagnosis. The primary reason for doing this is a survey that was done by the National Autism Association, which found that 92% of parents and caregivers said that their children with autism had wandered away at least once. The purpose of this is primarily to collect data. My concern with this comes as somebody who was a public school teacher for 15 years. And I know what happens when someone is diagnosed with something. It becomes something that is considered a part of them, and it becomes something that you ignore. If a kid is diagnosed as dyslexic, you don't wonder why they can't read. And one of the hallmarks of autism, one of the most frustrating components of it, is impaired communication. For someone like me, that can simply mean losing words when very upset. But for people who have much more profound autism, that can be even an inability to speak at all. Now, here's my question. If you can't speak, how do you communicate that you want to get away from something without moving away from it? I want you to consider the possibility, well, what would happen to an autistic child with a diagnosis of wandering who is being physically abused at home? Can't speak. How can you communicate to other people that your home environment is dangerous to you? The only way that I can think of is by running away from it. What if your social worker then looks at your diagnosis and finds that, gosh, you have this diagnosis of wandering? Well, that must be why you've left your home 7 times in the last month. A diagnosis is usually the end of asking questions. I started with the abuse issue because I think it's pretty easy to understand, but my biggest concern is actually that of sensory issues and how they will affect the learning of people with autism in the classroom. The difficulty that people with autism and some other developmental disabilities have with sensory issues is very difficult for neurotypical people to understand and to empathize with. I am bothered by such things as bright lights, loud noises, overwhelming smells, mostly just to the point where I'm so distracted I can't concentrate. In some situations, particularly with very bright light and very loud noises, I feel a sensation that becomes close to physical pain. When I am in an environment where my senses are overwhelmed, I certainly can't focus on anything other than the fact that my senses are overwhelmed. For many people with autism, the most significant barrier to education then becomes these sensory difficulties. And I am very concerned that if someone is classified with wandering, that significant sensory issues are also going to be ignored. In fact, as I say, this to me is a much more significant issue than the issue of abuse, because I think it's frankly going to happen all the time. If the teacher wears a perfume that makes the kid sick and he runs away from her classroom, nobody's going to wonder, well, okay, why does he keep running away from this classroom if he has a diagnosis of wandering? They're going to say, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. It's not you. He's just a wanderer. I mentioned earlier the significance of sensitivity to light, and this is actually my most pressing concern, particularly as standards for light bulbs are changing at the beginning of next year. I'm very concerned that as new lighting is installed, that it's going to be very disturbing to some of the people with autism. And again, if there are a significant number of them who are also diagnosed with wandering, then this lighting, which may be close to physically painful for them because of the cycling of fluorescent lights, that issue may never even be considered as something which is impairing their learning. Now, why does this matter? Because many of these people, even many of these people who cannot speak as children, through the aid of assistive technology or through continued education as they move into their teens or adults, develop the ability to communicate. And I am so concerned about someone who had that potential in them, but because their educational experience was so disrupted by sensory issues, they never developed the ability to speak for themselves, to advocate for themselves, to do what I'm doing now. And I really don't want there to be any barrier to their ability to communicate that there is something significantly wrong in their life. Again, if you couldn't talk, and the only way you could communicate that something was bad was to move away from it, how would you feel about people making a law that should be ignored? That's why I'm asking you to go to change.org and sign a petition that's been created there by the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. It asks that the CDC reconsider this proposal. I hope also that in addition to signing this petition at change.org, that you will visit my website, Thoughtcast, and that you will have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.